through the imperfect works of the Italian peacemakers. They have made many a strong in his fight weak, many a valiant man fearful, many a worthy man trusting to their imperfect fight has been slain, and many of our desperate boys and young youths to become in that rapier fight as good men as England yielded, and the tallest men in the land in that fight as very boys, and as they and no better. This good have the Italian teachers of offense done us. They have transformed our boys into men, and our men into boys, our strong men into weakness, our valiant men doubtful, and many worthy men, resolving themselves upon their false resolutions, have most wilfully in the field with their rapiers ended their lives. And lastly, have left to remain among us after their deaths these inconveniences behind them: false fencing books, imperfect weapons, false fights, and evil customs, whereby, for lack of use and practice in perfect weapons and true fight, we are disabled for the service of our prince, defense of our country, and safety of our lives in private fight. George Silver, Paradoxes of Defense, Paradox 37. Greetings, fencers of the interwebs. My name is William Kilmer, Will or Bill to most, Billy to exactly two. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I fence at Worcester Historical Swordsmanship in Worcester, Massachusetts, in the United States. I have been a student of the true fight of George Silver for nearly 3.5 years. Do you have a moment to talk about the true fight of George Silver? Given the temperate and moderate tone taken by George Silver in his writings, it is wonderful to me the contentiousness of the community of scholars who study his art. Isn't it wonderful to you? The panel on the live stream that occurred in December of 2020 on the 19th and the 20th, depending on what time zone you were in, was in fact moved to take up this very topic. Because the discussion occurred in the second half of the live stream after some participants had to leave, some members of the panel from whom I would very much like to have heard were not present, notably Nathan Barnett and Paul Wagner. In the meanwhile, however, Paul has published a video of his own on the topic, the Silvernomicon. Link in the description below if you haven't seen it. Pause this video right now, open a new tab, and watch it. Well, that's going to leave a mark. Hold! Hold! Judges, I remind the fencers to avoid excessive exuberance in their strikes. Am I clear? 3 points. 4 red against blue. Valid target, deep target, sufficient rotation, no valid after blow. Scorekeeper, 3 points. 4 red against blue. Does either need a moment? Timer's ready. Judges, ready? Fencers, ready. And fence. Hear from our panel.
The elephant in the room whenever people discuss silver is that when whenever I see a discussion about silver with people who don't do silver, there's this whole thing of like, we're talking as if the principles are really explicit, which I feel they are. But when people who don't do silver, they say, well, talk about this. So, well, people can't even seem to agree what the principles are. And as you're no doubt aware, I'm concerned that in the last 10 years, there's been a movement to really, to my mind, to really undermine the principles, and to whether that be people like Vincent Chevalier, who's a I understand a modern physicist who can't seem to grasp the concept that people in Silver's day didn't understand Newtonian physics, Anyway, there are people with various agendas that because Silver doesn't like, unlike all of the other, every single other English text explicitly says, they use almost the same language as Silver and say, but they say explicitly say, when you strike, you need to step in after that strike. You need to lead with the hand and step in after that strike. The Germans say that explicitly. And because Silver doesn't say that explicitly, there's this attempt to create, I don't even know how to work this weird sort of shuffle into distance and only attack from within distance. Which and I actually get the
because people don't.
I actually get the Ramos, what's his name, Ramos, who set up the George Silver Facebook group. He's apparently just shy of 7 foot, and if I was just shy of 7 foot, I wouldn't be doing a lot of passing in. I'd be working at the edge of my distance, which would be well out of their distance. So, I mean, it works for him, but I mean, how does it work for, my son's 5'7". He still wins tournaments, but he's not going to get within distance. If he tries to shuffle into distance, the way it's being described, he'd be clubbed like a baby seal.
But again, do you think that's a part of a problem of everything we're talking about? Is it's a very physical activity, and it's fighting, so it's meant to be chaotic, it's meant to be very physical. And for me, if you look at it too academic, you then start to lose the whole reason for it even to exist. We have to look at it academically because we've got to do a lot of research, and you guys, especially people like Stephen, are way better than me at that. So that's cool because you guys do that. But again, Stephen, a lot of these arguments that you sort of get dragged into, I think, is because people get so obsessed with particular words or particular ideas, and I just want to say, just do it. Just go and pick up a sword, find a friend, and do it.
I agree.
If you want to understand.
When I turn around and say that, I've been doing it, and I've taught, people like Nathan in the US, who's been, he's a disgustingly good swordsman. And second time I did a seminar with their group, it was like, oh God, you really got what I was teaching in the first seminar, didn't you? So I'm not sure how much more I can teach you. But, the principles of true and false times, as I understand them, have been working for 30 years. And pretty much, if I do a false time in a fight, which, you don't do a false time in your initial action, but in the to and fro, you'll start to, 2 or 3 actions in, it's very easy to slip into a false time. And every time I do a false time, if I'm up against somebody competent like my son, I get clobbered. And it's so obvious that that's how it works.
Yeah.
And yet you turn around and say, well, this has been working for us for 30 years. And it's like, oh, that doesn't mean anything. It's like experience is just thrown out the window.
Yep.
It's very frustrating that, 20 years ago we thought we had all these questions settled, and then people have turned around and started trying to turn. I mean, to my mind, Mike Edelson and is this is confirmed by people I talk to in the US. He's trying to turn all of Western swordsmanship into the Japanese swordsmanship he learned. There's an underlying what's the word I'm looking for? There's an attempt. It's not an honest attempt to interpret the sources. It's an attempt. He's got a conclusion that he wants to come to, and is going to shove the sources into that.
He's made the conclusion. He's looking for evidence to back it up.
Yeah.
Rather than going down that path too much, I do want to make a really important point, Stephen, that I think periodically questioning the assumptions or previous conclusions that you have is a good and healthy thing in scholarship. Now, that's not to say I'm agreeing with this particular hypothesis or anything. I'm just saying that revisiting previously decided matters and just confirming or modifying given new experience and new information, I think is a healthy thing to do, and it ends with a stronger final answer. That's probably the scientist in me saying that. That said, in this particular case, what I would love to see, and I haven't yet seen it from the people that are proposing this new interpretation, is the thing I would like to see is an overall system, really. I haven't actually seen it. I've just seen an objection to this particular point.
I mean, I'd just be happy to see them fight, actually against someone who wants to fight them, and see how the interpretation actually works, using the actual timing of a fight, and not just sitting back and going like, okay, well, if he did this, I'll do this. Well, could you do that? I don't know. You could. So,
well, it certainly worked for somebody like Ramos in South America, who's, like I said, apparently close to 7 foot tall, where his within distance is certainly not going to be my within distance. But, does it work for me at 175 centimetres or 5'9"? And look, I agree 100%. I actually found the process of writing the paper that I did was I had to do a lot of research, and I'm glad that I got to do that. I found that an incredibly useful process. But it's really frustrating when people are saying, well, whatsoever is done with the hand before the foot is true fight. Doesn't mean whatsoever is done with the hand before the foot is true fight.
Just while we've got a lot of people here, has anybody fenced anybody from that?
I mean, Mike Edelson's a good fighter.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen him since he started looking into silver. So I don't know how he fights now using silver.
Yeah, and I guess I do specifically with silver, yeah.
Actually, I fought with both Corey and Mike.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things you have to look at by saying, I'd like to see him fight, I mean, yeah, I'm like Duncan. I'm a fighter. I've been teaching Dos Padres Eskrima for over a decade, and we're a fight school. But I'm also 64, going to be 65 in a month or so. And, you know, you have to look at that sometimes too. I mean, even though someone might be using certain kind of techniques, maybe somebody a little bit young, there's always somebody a little younger, a little stronger than Mike Edelson. You know, and Corey's not all that buff to begin with. But I do really agree with like what Gareth was saying. I think that, and being a science guy myself, I think you have to have a certain amount of respect for anybody that's willing to write, you know, do some studying, whether you agree or not, do some studying, write those ideas down, and then put it out to be, publish it to be put it out to peers to look at. There always has to be a certain amount of respect for those people, you know, whether you agree with it or whether you don't. You know, they're putting an idea forth, and I think that's good, healthy stuff in HEMA. It opens a discussion. And I think sometimes you see that. I think sometimes in the Fiore world, you know, in the States here anyhow, it seems like, boy, it just doesn't seem like anything has really happened new with Fiore for so long, because it seems like if you're going to do something, one or two people have to say that that's okay. And everybody's afraid to just try something new because you got to be blessed by, I don't want to say any names, by so-and-so or so-and-so. But I think any kind of discussion is good. And I've read, you know, I read Corey's and original paper, and Stephen, your work, follow-up work on that was just awesome. And what a cool thing. You know, it opens a discussion. Whether you think they're right or wrong, who cares? You know? It's a good thing.
There sure was a lot more traffic on the sites when those discussions
oh
were going on.
That's true. And Stephen, your response, which was essentially the deepest dive into what a true time is that I've ever seen, was an amazing piece of work, and that wouldn't have existed without them.
Oh yeah, I mean look, it's useful, and it's got me really thinking. Like, well, why do I think that? And diving into the depths of Aristotle, and I mean there are people out there. I think Vincent's trapped in a modern physics mindset. He just can't cope with the fact that people 400 years ago didn't see the world as he sees it, through a Newtonian or Einsteinian viewpoint. So that's, you know, you've really got to look at the world through their eyes and say, when they were talking about time and distance, how did they understand it?
See, I came from it from a different direction, and what was very strange is that the modern way they were talking about time in the context of a fight never even occurred to me, because it never made sense.
Yeah.
So when they started talking about it, I was just thinking, but it's a fight. That doesn't. It's all about tempo. That doesn't make. And then Stephen did like his and said, yeah, that's how I understood it, but not on a sort of bringing in Aristotle or anything. It was more an experience thing, and actually, as I said, doing it. And once you do it, you realise.
We talked about that comment that people don't understand time in an absolute sense.
Yeah.
In a fight, a time, if something is fast in a fight, it just means, it doesn't mean that, you know, your sword was traveling at X miles per hour. It just means that you were able to do that action in the time available to you. That's what we perceive as being fast in a martial sense. And if something's slow, then we don't. What that means is we don't have time to do it. We are unable to do it in the time available.
In the time available. This is why your concept of slow hand I always disagree with and didn't like until I got into conversation with you about it, and I finally understood what it was you were talking about. And I was like, oh yeah, now it makes sense.
Well, it's just,
and as you said, it was the name slow hand, which I didn't like. I think really. not the actual
which sort
concept.
I've tried to get away from that, but people keep dragging me back to it. That it's just it's not a name I came up with, but it's a name that somebody came up with, and obviously it's a pun on my surname. It just means that. But everyone, if you give a sword to somebody and stick them in open fight and say do a cut, they don't swing the hand as fast as humanly possible. They just, because they instinctively know if I do that, I'll have swung through before my foot's brought me into distance. So they time the hand with the foot. But the thing is, as I've shown over and over and over again, and which some people steadfastly refuse to accept, is that doesn't mean that the hand is tied to the speed of the foot. In fact, it absolutely means it's not. It means that
it's not.
That I can speed that hand up, I can change direction, and my whole fighting style is based around bringing the hand in at just fast enough so I'm not creating a target, and getting that basically almost like a forehand ward. You're basically coming into a forehand ward and then coming in behind it, but you don't want to start in a forehand ward because that limits your just sort of cutting into it as you attack.
It was interesting you talking about like speed, and the last sort of big gathering I sort of went to, which was actually about December last year before everything went wrong. I was fighting a lot of people I'd never met before, and quite often got the same comments off a lot of people. Oh, but you're quite fast. You're quite fast, and I'm thinking, I'm 40, and I'm a bit overweight. I'm not fast at all. And I said, but again, I was explaining to people, said, no, I'm not fast. And then you start talking about silver, and some people's eyes glaze over, and some people start to get interested and say, no, it's not that I'm fast, it's the timing. And then you start to explain it. So it was interesting. It's interesting that people start to perceive it as being fast, and it's not fast. It's just, as you said, working within the time allowed.
I actually gauge one of the ways I gauge that students are advancing is when they start realizing that the more experienced students aren't faster than them, that it is just about timing and about being in the right place at the right time, and time and place and just economy of motion.
That's why I said it's so important. It's so vital, and the way Silver teaches it, and the way he talks about it to me is pretty unique. And it seems to be unique because when I explain it, instead of explaining to lots of other martial artists, and they all get the principle, but they've never thought about it in that way, and they've never seen it written down like that. Yeah,
and I've had that same experience with Gareth, Stu McDonald in Melbourne. Yeah, he just said that having time and distance and timing explained to him in Silver's terminology just opened things up to him, and he went, okay, I knew this, but I didn't have a language to explain it until now. Into just the outside edge of what Silver calls the first distance, wide distance. So they're just outside of close distance. If I attack them in the second true time of the hand and body, it can like turn their movement into a false time. And you get that combination. Silver talks about combinations of, so something that's a true time action, something that's not a tempo because it's not bringing you within distance, can be turned into a tempo by you attacking into it. But if you attacked into it within time of the hand, body, and foot, you'd probably be too slow. But if you do it with a time and hand and body, it can be very, very effective.
Yep. Use that. Fully recognize that, Stephen. Yeah.
Yeah. So just that. Yeah, trying to play with combinations of time, and so the time that you think you're in isn't necessarily the time it'll be when you look at the combination of your action and the other person's action. So,
Malk's just reminded me of something. We did a demo once where basically Malk was drinking with one hand and defending people off with the other, and it was to demonstrate that he was forcing them to be in time with the hand, body, and foot. And he made sure he was definitely always countering with time of the hand, and he could drink and very easy, just bump, 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 because of the different timings. It was one of them silly things, but it sort of demonstrates the idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas if you get, if you stay within distance and I mean, that's why flying out is so critical. Strike and fly out. And certainly the older I get, the more I really have to make sure. I used to like sort of staying in and sort of, okay, I can play this game and keep parrying and riposting, but yeah, the older I get, the more I want to give myself that time buffer of being back out again.
Now, absolutely. I don't know here who has seen any of the episodes that I've put up, but I argue that Silver really doesn't want you to stay in close distance at all. He wants you to do your business and get out of there.
Yep.
Old mind.
Agreed.
Like,
which is not to say you can't. I mean, if you know what the rules are, you can break them, but knowing what the risks are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I always tell people that it's not that anything is particularly wrong. If I do something which looks silly, but I know why I'm doing it, and I've got very good reasons to do it. Except, it's basically, as you say, if you know why you're doing it, and you've got good reasons to do it, almost anything actually goes. You've got to get to that point where you understand what's going on, so you can do that. Or as Stephen said, basically, you can break the rules as long as you understand why you're breaking the rules.
Yeah, and there's a risk, right? It's trade-offs.
There's always a risk. Everything's a risk. There's no guarantees in this game.
And yeah, as I always say to my students, if I'm not the most, sometimes I'll do stuff that's outside of my normal fencing style, because otherwise I'm the most predictable man in the cell. And if I'm not the most predictable man in the cell, then I'm not teaching you very well. I'm not holding anything back. I'm saying this is what I think you should do. And oh, what a surprise! That's what I do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But then people have got to take their own. You know, like I had a guy yesterday saying, "Oh, do I have to use this technique?" It's like, no. Use whatever technique you want. If you think this he's got a shoulder injury, and so if you can't do that, then just no, that's out of your repertoire. Don't do it. Or if it just doesn't work for you,
yeah, but you only know that by actually trying it. So
yeah, well, one of the things that I think is important is to separate, as this is a sport fencing thing, separate the concept of a bout and an assault. And it's a concept from sport fencing. An assault is where you're just fencing and you're just trying stuff. And it's important to sometimes fence just to say, look, I'm not that good at this technique, so I'm gonna try it a lot, and if I get hit, well, who cares?
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then sometimes say, all right, now I'm playing for sheep stations, as we say in Australia. So where all right, I'm gonna play to my strengths. If something's not working for me, I won't use it because now I am actually playing for points.
Mm-hmm.
So,
or even more so, if you then extrapolate that to actual violence and fighting someone for like real, then you're going to do whatever works best for you and whatever works the quickest.
Yeah,
you're not going to start playing about, and that's for me, because that's the side of things that I really like to study and think of. That's the mindset that I always try and bring back into it. Was you can play the what if game forever, but the problem with the what if game is that it ties you up in like knots, and in a real fight you don't get that luxury.
If the communities with which you associate do not have a problem with killing off or banishing their deviants, you are indeed a unicorn. Received wisdom has strong backing in every community of which I am a member and of which I am aware. Just asking certain questions in many circles can brand one as an iconoclastic heretic to be shunned and cancelled. And as social creatures, canceling hurts, and fear of canceling makes timid the curiosity. Ultimately, it is the heretics against received wisdom who are the salvation of communities when things go south. Plate tectonics, as it turns out, is a thing. And indeed, the majority of ulcers are caused by a bacterial infection. In my lifetime, both of these views were ridiculed. But now, in order to preserve their productive iconoclasts, a community has to tolerate a lot of folks who are one screw short of fully assembled and a number of outright nut jobs. And most communities find that difficult, if not impossible, to tolerate. Thus far, the silver community has been, in my humble opinion, reasonably generous with our iconoclasts. Yea, us. That being said, plate tectonics and the infection theory of ulcers are accepted now because ultimately their proponents were able to show the receipts. Proponents of a new paradigm have to be able to demonstrate the truth of their assertion in a form that is compelling to the majority of the community. Another paper or a multi-paragraph Facebook post is not going to do it. Nor would a video of marginally competent saber fencing which violates the grounds and governors be terribly convincing. Should such a thing exist. I will parenthetically note that I personally cannot reconcile the balestra as a technique with Silver's third and fourth governors. Those who espouse an innovative interpretation of true fight have to be able to demonstrate that their version of Silver's system can train fencers who fight consistent with the grounds and governors and who are able to perform effectively under field conditions because those are the criteria that George Silver sets. Many thanks again to the participants in the live stream, who in this episode were Stephen Hand, Duncan McEvoy, Alan Byrnes, Gareth Jones, Alex Hanning, and Tom Karnuta. Tom, I hope that I am pronouncing that correctly. As always, thank you, Michael, for your efforts in the editing bay, and thanks in this episode to Debbie for some work for us behind the camera. We who follow the true fight of George Silver are a small community. Worldwide, we are a minority of a minority of a minority. Therefore, take not arms upon every light occasion. Let not one friend upon a word or trifle violate another, but let each man zealously embrace friendship, and turn not familiarity into strangeness, kindness into malice, nor love into hatred. Nourish not these strange and unnatural alterations. Admonitions to the Gentlemen and Brave Gallants of Great Britain Against Quarrels and Brawls, written by George Silver, Gentleman. Brief Instructions upon my Paradoxes of Defense. And with that, Michael and Debbie and I wish you all a happy new year. Peace, love, joy, hope, and the wisdom of God be with you all. Stay curious. See you on the flip side. That has gotta leave a mark. Hello. You're here to help, right? Yes, you're here to help. Of course you are. Of course you're here to help. Well, such a good boy. Yes, he is. He's such a good boy. Are you going to bite me now? Are you going to bite me now? Oh, so fierce. You are so fierce. Yes, you are. As most of you know, I have been studying the true fight of George Silver for about 3.5 years now. I am not an expert. I'm just a student trying to share the resources that I have found helpful and the conclusions that I have reached so far. I rely heavily upon the expertise of those who have gone before, and I intend to credit their works and opinions whenever I reference them. If I have failed to do so, or you feel that I have misrepresented or misattributed your views, or failed to state that a certain erroneous view is entirely my own, please let me know in the comments or privately, and I will endeavor to make corrections and amends in a subsequent video. All errors are, of course, entirely my own. Like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you on the flip side.